In your bulletins, you will find a sermon note-taking sheet. So get that out and follow along this morning. I think most of you know that summer vacation is ending. Parents are saying, woo-woo, and the kids are saying, ah. Well, summer vacation is ending in two ways, in fact. Number one, kids are going back to school. Summer is over, classes are starting, so summer vacation is over. But secondly, many schools are ending the practice of summer vacation. The summer break is getting shorter. Breaks throughout the rest of the year are getting longer. And so summer vacation, as we know it in many places, is fading. Now, the little kid within me says, why? Why would you do that? Summer vacation is sacred, like Christmas. To mess with summer vacation is like messing with Christmas. What's wrong with these people? Well, they have two reasons for ending summer vacation as we know it. Number one, they say that it is harmful. And number two, they say that it is not needed anymore. Let me share with you what Professor Kenneth Gold, he is Associate Professor of Education at City University of New York. He says that many educators find that summer vacation is harmful. They point out what they call summer fade. When kids come back to school, they don't remember a lot of stuff. They don't have the knowledge that they used to. They have a loss of knowledge. And the teachers are saying that kids remember little of what they taught them the whole last year. And so educators say we need to end summer vacation because it's harmful. And then number two, Professor Gold says that summer vacation needs to end because it is not really needed anymore. We don't really need summer vacation. Well, let me tell you the history. Back in the 1800s, kids used to go to school 48 weeks a year. Did you realize that? In the 1800s, city kids went to school 48 weeks a year. You know how many days that is? 240. Michelle, how many days do kids go now? About 180. Wow, 240 versus 180. Well, some of the educators were saying that's not good for kids to go to school that much, particularly during the summer. And so in the 1800s, there was an education reform. And that's where they came up with summer vacation. Kids need the summer off. They're going to school too much. Kids, can I have an amen? You guys are lame. Okay, now there were many reasons why they said summer vacation was good, okay, and that going to school in the summer was bad. Okay, so let me share them with you. Okay, number one, the schools were not air conditioned. Can you imagine the learning conditions when it was so hot and stinky and everything? It just was not good to go to school in unair-conditioned buildings, okay? Number two, the regular teachers were not available. They would go to class during the summer themselves and keep their education current, keep their training at a really good level. And so that means the school districts had to turn to less qualified teachers, normally younger teachers. And the educators were concerned that during the summer they weren't learning much anyway because of unqualified teachers. And then the last one, I didn't think about this, but the last reason that they gave was doctors said it was medically unsound for kids to study that much. They said that the brain wears out. You can't afford to study so much. You need to give the kids the summer off to kind of recoup their brain powers. Okay, let me share with you. The Pennsylvania Journal in the 1800s expressed concern that children, because they're going to school too much, grew up puny, lank, pallid. What's that mean? pale, pallid, okay, emaciated. What weren't they feeding them at school? Rounded shouldered and thin breasted because they went to school too much. And so doctors said it is a medically unsound principle to make the kids go to school in the summertime. So the education reformer says we gotta stop having school in the summer. We gotta have education. Okay. Now today, most educators would say, well, that just isn't true. You know, we've got air-conditioned school. We've got good teachers year-round. We know that the brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And so we now know that summer vacation is not needed, although many, many kids will not agree with you if you say that. And the little kid within me says, nah, okay. Well, that's the reason why educators wanted to end summer vacation. It was harmful and it was not needed. Now, I tell you that because many people read some of the laws in the book of Exodus that we are studying, and they say the same thing. If I were to do what the book of Exodus says, that would be harmful. And I don't really need to do that anyway. So there are many people, as they look at the book of Exodus, and they see the laws and they say, I don't want to do that. I want to disobey that. And that's not good. One of the kind of laws, one category of laws that people disagree with in the laws in Exodus is what we call the Sabbath laws, which I'm going to share with you. There are many different kinds of laws in Exodus 21 through 40. Those 19 chapters are filled with all kinds of laws that deal with all kinds of things, and one of the kinds of laws is called the Sabbath laws. And some people in particular feel that the Sabbath laws are harmful, they're not needed, they don't need to do what God has to say, and so they disobey them, and of course that's not good. Now let me share with you that the Sabbath laws include Sabbath laws for animals, for the land, and also for people. Today we're going to study the Sabbath laws, and while it's true that summer vacation is harmful and not needed, that is not true of the Sabbath laws. They are helpful, they are needed, and I want to share with you three different categories of them this morning. First of all, the reason why we're going to study the Sabbath laws is they were given because some people in the Old Testament believed that burning the candle at both ends was the best way to live. They went 24/7 like many of us. Their pagan neighbors did that. That's the way most people thought. And like educators in the 1800s, they believed that more was better. And so there were many people that said, we've got to burn the candle at both ends if we're going to get anything done. Well, God knows better. God knows that we need some time to stop. We need to have some time to rest, just like in the children's sermon where God led the people with a cloud, gave them breaks. So today we're going to study the Sabbath laws. Okay, let me get started here with the Sabbath laws. You know what the word Sabbath means? Many people think it means seventh, but it doesn't. You talk about the Sabbath day, they think it's the seventh day. No, the Sabbath day is the day to stop. The word Sabbath means to stop. It was instructed to tell Israel that it is a good thing to stop. It is beneficial to stop. Others may burn the candle at both ends. God's people were not supposed to. Others may believe that 24/7 is necessary to get everything done. God's people need to think differently. The Sabbath laws say it is to your benefit to stop and take a break. Now, let me illustrate God's logic to you in a way that you will agree. Many years ago, employers did not want to give their employees a paid vacation. Did you know that? Paid vacations are fairly recent because employers thought, I'm not paying good money for work I'm not getting. And so they said, if you want to take a break, do it on your own. Well, who could afford that? So for many years, employers did not give paid vacations. Now they do. Do you know why? Because when people come back from vacation, they have a different attitude, they are better workers, they are more productive, and so taking a week or two break is actually to the company's advantage. It actually pays money in order to pay your employees to take work off. Well, that's God's logic. We just do better after a rest. We just do better after we stop. 24/7 is just really crazy. Well, that's God's wisdom in all that we're going to cover this morning. So the Sabbath laws are based on a really important wisdom that we dare not overlook. All right, I want to cover 3 areas that the Sabbath laws cover. The first one is in Exodus 23, verses 10 and 11. For 6 years you are to plow your fields and harvest the crops. But during the 7th year, let the land stand unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what they leave. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. The first set of Sabbath laws says that the land was to have a Sabbath. That simply means they were to plow the land for 6 years so they could feed their family, they could gather seed, use it for an income. But they were not to plow the land on the 7th year. They were to let it lie fallow, and what grew on its own was for the poor, was for wild animals. And so here is a law concerning the land. The land should not be plowed 24/7 all of the time. You've got to stop plowing it and let it rest. Now, put yourself in Israel's shoes. They don't know a lot about growing crops. They've been slaves in Egypt for hundreds of years. They've been wanderers in the desert for decades. And they now hear, as they come to the end of their 6th year in the Promised Land, next year you can't plow. Next year you can't plant a crop. You know what they're thinking? We don't know much about land, but we do know that if you plow, you get food and you get to eat. If you don't plow, you don't get food and you don't get to eat. And so the people must have thought this law is harmful. This law is not needed. What is God thinking? He's got to be crazy. We know from history that a lot of people felt that way. But later on in Israel history, they started to do this. They tried it. And you know what happened? They left the crops unplowed the 7th year. On the 8th year, what happened? On the 8th year, the crop was even bigger than ever, and the 9th year too. God was right in telling the people, give your land a Sabbath. After a time of rest, it will do even better. It will be worth your while to be inconvenienced for that 7th year. And so God was right. The Sabbath laws are helpful and they are needed. And so we need to be careful that we don't just reject them out of hand because they don't make a lot of sense to us. All right, let's go on to the next verse, verse number 12. A second category of Sabbath laws. 6 days do your work, but on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the slave born in your household and the alien as well may be refreshed. This passage tells us that man and beasts are to have Sabbaths too. They are to work 6 days, but then on the 7th day they are not to work. It's to be a day of rest. Now put yourself again in Israel's shoes. They have just moved into the Promised Land. You know what it's like to move to a new home? Move to a new place? You can't get done in 7 days what needs to be done, let alone 6. So imagine these people as they adjust to the new land. God tells them 1 day in 7 you're supposed to rest. They must have thought, God is crazy. We can't get it done in 6. We can't get it done in 7. So they thought, this Sabbath law is harmful. It gets in our way. It is not needed. But you tell me what happens. What happened to them when they did rest one day? What happened on the 8th day? What happened when they went back to work after a day of rest? Exactly the same thing. On the 8th day, they were rested, they were energized, they were ready to go because they took a day off. I questioned whether to share this statistic with you or not, but I think the Lord is leading me to. Do you know when most suicides occur? You know that? Sunday night. You know why? People are worn out. They don't want to go back to work. They don't want to go back to life on Monday. If you go on the internet and you type in Monday and you look at pictures, you'll get all kinds of funny things. People dreading Monday. They hate Monday. You know, and they say, why is Friday so far from Monday, but Monday is so close to Friday? People hate Mondays. They've got a picture of Garfield smashed with this boulder called Monday. Okay, don't most people feel that way? Monday is it is Monday. Okay, why? Because we're forgetting the principle of rest. You take one day off, you're ready to go again. Mondays will never be the same again if you take Sundays off, if you take the day of rest and follow what God says. Now, I know the temptation. You can't get your work done now in 7 days, let alone 6. Well, is it working? No, it's not. So the Bible gives this Sabbath day law to man and beast. 1 day in 7 needs to be a day of rest. And then you'll be ready to go on Monday. Now, okay, so here's the application. We feel that we have to work 24/7 to get stuff done. Am I right? Anybody not believe that? You got to go 24/7 to get it done. And we believe other people have to be available 24/7. The stores have to be open 24/7 because you might need something. The restaurants need to be open 24/7. You may need that. Repair shops need to be open 24/7. Pharmacies need to be open 24/7. Why? Because you can't get it done in 6 days. That's what we believe. But I want you to remember, what did employers find out? Give your workers a rest, it's better. What did Israel find out? Give your land rest, give yourself rest, it's better. Boy, that's hard to say as an American, isn't it? But it's really true. In the Old Testament, when people rested, they thrived because of the wisdom that God has in the Sabbath laws. Okay, now I want to dwell on the third category a little bit more. I think for a couple of reasons. You've probably not heard this one before, so you'll see it with fresh eyes. You've heard me preach on the Sabbath day how many times? Over and over and over again, okay? And so it's real easy to tune me out. Well, here goes Brother Roger again. He's on his soapbox about taking Sunday off. You've not heard me preach on this one. And so you'll see this with fresh eyes, and I think you'll see the wisdom even better in this one. Plus, can I be honest with you? People who don't believe in God look at this law as an excuse to say God is not fair, God is not loving. And so you need to have an answer to people that open up the Bible and read this verse and say, your God is wrong. You know, your God doesn't love people. Look at what he allows. Okay? So let's look at it. Back to chapter 21, verses 2 and 3. Look at what it says. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. These verses cover servants. These verses cover servants. In fact, there are many laws in chapter 21, if you'll read on, concerning servants. Now, of all of the laws I'm going to tell you about, this will be the one that will be hardest for you to accept. So, if I can convince you that God is right in this case, I think you will see that God is right in all of the cases of taking a Sabbath and taking a rest. So I want you to listen carefully to what this passage says. This passage covers servants, not slaves. People who debunk the Bible, people who say that God allows slavery, will dig out this verse and to say, see there, your God is hateful, your God is not loving, your God is not fair, because he talks about slaves. This passage is not about slaves, it's about servants. Now, what's the difference? A servant is someone who, okay, if you look down at verse 16, the Bible forbids slavery. It says anybody who kidnaps somebody and takes them is to be put to death. That's what slavery is all about. We went to Africa, kidnapped people, brought them here. That is forbidden in the Bible. The picture of slavery, that is not it when God is talking about. God forbids that kind of thing. Now, I know people in the South use the Bible to excuse slavery, but you can't do it because this is about slaves. This is about servants. Okay, a servant is someone who willingly sold themselves to somebody else. Somebody who willingly sold themselves to a master. They weren't kidnapped. It was not done against their will. This was something they did on their own. Now, the question is, why? Why would anybody do that? Why would they sell themselves to be somebody else's servant? Well, most of the time in the Old Testament, it was to get money to get out of jail or to stay out of jail. Let me explain. In the Old Testament, if you got into debt and you could not pay, guess where they put you? In a hellhole called jail. I mean, they were terrible. Jailers didn't feed you. They didn't have cable. They had no TV. It was a terrible place to be. So if you were in debt and you couldn't pay, you went to jail. Not only that, but if you had committed a crime and you owed a fine and you could not pay it, they put you in jail. And if you had an accident that was your fault and you were too poor to make restitution, guess where they put you? They put you in jail. So people back in those days say, rather than go to hell in jail, I'm going to sell myself to someone else. And then I can take that money and give it to whoever I owe. And then I will work for that person to pay off that debt. Because I would rather be a servant than be in jail. So you understand what we're talking about here? People who were desperate to stay out of jail went to people and said, would you buy me so that I can serve you rather than be in jail? Now notice what the Bible says about servants, okay? Servants were to have a Sabbath too. Okay? Servants were supposed to have a Sabbath. They were to work for 6 years. But what happened on the 7th year? They were supposed to go free without paying anything. Okay? So they were to work for 6 years to pay off the debt, to work for their master, to live with their master, and then after 7 years they were supposed to go free. Now put yourself in the shoes of the master. For 6 years you've had this person working for free. You've been paying them, but they've been paying you back. They've been doing work that you need done. And so year number 7 comes and you're told, you got to let them go. What are you going to think? Oh, this is not needed. This is not what I want. I'll have to hire somebody to do their work. And that person won't pay me the wages that I give them. And so a lot of people would say, nope, not going to do it. I'm going to hang on to my servant. I need them. And so they would say, this is harmful. This is not needed. So you know, when Israel first heard this law, they said, you got to be crazy. A Sabbath for servants? Well, Dr. Riker, who wrote the commentary on Exodus that I'm studying, does a really, really great job of explaining God's logic for this. And it just blew me out of the saddle when I said, I never thought about that. God is so wise in this area of the Sabbath. So I want to share with you 3 questions that Dr. Riker answers, and it will help you to see the amazing God that we have, who understands what happens when you follow His laws to stop and take a break and to rest. Okay, you ready for this? This is really cool. Don't miss this. Okay, the Sabbath laws are helpful and needed because of three questions. Number one, what kind of people sold themselves into servanthood? What kind of people did that? Well, remember what I told you. People that were in debt, probably because they didn't have a trade. Perhaps they were poor money managers. And so people like that sold themselves into servanthood. Also, people who had committed crimes did. And not only that, people who were too poor to pay restoration. Okay? Now, second question. What happened to them when they were with their master? Remember, for 6 years they lived in his house, learning a trade, learning life skills. Okay? So what happened to them? Well, they learned a trade. They learned life skills. Was that helpful? Was that needed? Number two, they produced hard and consistent work. They developed a work ethic while they were servants, or they went to jail. You understand how that works? Okay, so they had a motivation to learn hard work skills. Is that helpful for that kind of people? Is that needed? Absolutely. And lastly, they learned to manage their money, because their master, while they had to pay their salary back and they had to live on the little bit that was left. I don't think the master bought them toothpaste or iPods or stuff like that. Okay, so the master paid them. They had to learn to manage their money. Was that helpful? Was that needed? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, are we okay in the questions? Did I mess up? We're okay? Okay. What kind of people would they become? These people who were in debt, these people who were poor, these people who were criminals, what kind of people would they become? They would become the kind of people God wanted them to be. They needed to be. Society needed them to be. In other words, they would be transformed. This servant law that God told Israel to obey, it changed them into healthy, productive citizens. Does that blow you away like it blew me away? What kind of a God would think of that in how to deal with people that were really struggling? What a great, great God. Now, Jesus in the New Testament said that that is the whole purpose for the Sabbath laws. That's the whole reason why God gave a Sabbath, for the benefit of people, so that we would be changed. Look at Mark 2:27. There is a real bad misunderstanding about the Sabbath laws in Jesus' day, and so he just spilled it out to people. He just told them what the truth was, and here's what he says. Mark 2:27. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man. What does that mean? The Sabbath was made for man. The Sabbath was made for man's good. It is for our benefit that we stop. It is for our benefit that we actually take a day off, etc., etc., etc. Now, like the people of Israel, we need to trust God. God says you can do it in 6 days. You need to trust Him. You need to get by the world's wisdom that says 24/7 is necessary or you will die. You won't die. And then secondly, particularly when it comes to Sunday, we need to take the whole day off. Now, I know that's crazy. I know you have trouble believing that. You need to take the whole day off. We have a funeral home next door, as you know, Bethany Funeral Home, a great, great funeral home. I asked them one time, people who observe Sunday, do they die? Are there people here because they took Sunday off and they died? And Paul Matukowicz, who runs the place, says, we've never had a case, the cause of death on their death certificate, they took Sunday off. You will not die if you follow this. No, you might die if you, by the way, when most heart attacks occur? Monday morning. So you may die if you don't take Sunday off. Okay, seriously, we Americans need to hear the lesson of God's wisdom about the Sabbath law. So here's what I'm inviting you to do. Trust God, trust His wisdom, and follow the whole idea of rest and a break. Secondly, quit going 24/7. I know you're tempted to. Don't do that. And also, when you take the whole day off, give somebody else the day off too. If you're in their store, if you're in their restaurant, if you're in their business, they will feel obligated to be there for you. So just stay out. Give them a chance to close. Now, what are you going to do if you take the whole day off? Okay, yeah, you can take a nap. You can spend the day getting closer to Jesus. A quiet time, Sunday morning, Sunday night. It's a great, great time. Of course, if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, that's the best part of knowing the Bible and what it has to say. So if you've just been running your own life and doing what you think and think it's going to work out, I hope you've seen this morning God's wisdom is awesome. God's wisdom really works. And we'd like to talk with you about talking with God, making Him the Lord of your life, making Him the boss, and following what He has to say. Find His forgiveness. Find His eternity. Let's stand and pray together, and then we can sing. Our Heavenly Father, I pray that your Holy Spirit can speak to us. Our hearts want to push back, just like kids want to push back. I don't want to go to school in the summertime. They push back from that. So we push back from this whole idea of a Sabbath. And I pray you'll help us to see that it really is the way to live. And if there's somebody here that's never started that journey with you, never lived that life of yours, I pray today they'll make that decision and be willing to talk with someone about that. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Let's sing Change My Heart, Oh God.